Heck,
There you are.
side. I guess I'll just do this from Shiloh's phone.
I know, it wasn't working for yours for some reason. Check this out. All right, we got a total of 3 people watching.
And the sponsorships are going to start rolling in no time.
Whoa! There go my phone. This is professional. That's good enough. All right. Welcome to episode 1 of Tallboys
And Trackmasters.
The working man's dual sport podcast. So, I think for episode 1, we should talk about what we think is the perfect dual sport bike. So, if you had to build one, what would you build it with, Trevor?
Somebody else's money.
Most definitely.
No, I'd want
Broken poor.
honestly something along the lines of a KTM 500 with maintenance intervals that are a bit more manageable.
Yeah.
Be
I think we can both kind of agree that there's no perfect bike. The unicorn bike doesn't exist.
No,
You can kind of
can get close. I think a lot of guys would better be served by just getting 2 bikes, setting one up for like adventure and moto camping and one up for harder enduro and stuff like that. That's odd with your interests.
Yep. I've kind of done that myself. I got the KTM 500 and the Versus, if I ever get the Versus back together, which isn't looking good right now. But it's nice to have one bike to ride on the street. And
direct
yeah.
DRZ 400 fork.
Yeah, DRZ fork and V-Strom 650 wheels bolt right on the Versus, if you believe anything on Adventure Rider. So, but yeah, let's go through the list and poke holes on every manufacturer's bike that they have as a dual sport and kind of show you that the perfect bike doesn't exist. So
I'm interested.
Let's start with Honda.
You want to do the 300L or the 450L?
Well, we'll just go from smallest to largest. I think that'd be the best thing to do. So yeah, we'll start with the 300L and the 300 Rally.
I mean, they're great bikes. They're reliable. There's a lady that goes by the name of Itchy Boots that's ridden one from like all of South America, then ported over to Europe and rode it all through there. It's the same issues that plagued the 250L. They're the weight of a DRZ 400, the power of a TTR 125, and the suspension's just not there. I mean, it's great for beginner stuff, like just plunking around and stuff, but as you get a little bit more skill and want to go faster, the suspension limitations start getting to be pretty significant.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that Honda put all that research and development into making that 300, especially the Rally edition with all the nice fairings and everything that's on it, and then decide to put pogo sticks front and rear for suspension.
It's like anything else. They're designing to a price point. I think for the 250L, they were trying to put out the most affordable dual sport bike, and they did.
Yeah.
And it's gotten a lot into the hobby and stuff. But yeah, the suspension, like there's guys out there immediately before break-in oil change is even done, putting Olin's front and rear on it just to get something that's usable. But even then, you still weighs 305 or 315 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, and the price of the especially like the Rally Raid Stage 1 and Stage 2 kits for the 300L and the Rally, that's like 3/4 of the cost of the bike. So, I mean, that's a lot of money to be blowing on just trying to upgrade something that they should have upgraded to start with. I mean, kind of on the same small dual sport front, like I'm sure we'll talk about shortly, like the KLX 300, comparable price, comparable power, and way better suspension right out of the box.
I think a KLX 250, which is pretty much the same bike. It's just the piston or the cylinders punched out to,
right,
80 some cc's or something like that. The suspension is definitely better. It's compression adjustable in the front and compression rebound adjustable in the back. Whereas I think it might still be like that on the 300Ls, but on the 250Ls, you had I don't think any adjustment up front, and you had adjustable preload in the rear.
Right. So moving up from the 300 on the Hondas, we have the 450L, which I know there was a lot of hype whenever it first came out, and supposed to be definitely the Euro fighter from the Japanese brand. And I rode a couple 450Ls. I rode one of the first ones that I ever saw around. Buddy at work, Chuck Fluharty, had, and I really liked the suspension, the feel of it, and just the fuel mapping was absolutely terrible. I mean, you breathe on the clutch or just trying to chop off the throttle, it quit immediately. I know our buddy Mark Wolf has one that rides with us a good bit. He was talking the other day about getting a fuel programmer. He's almost got it, I think, and his bike seems a little bit better, but I think his is the RL, which supposedly has a little bit better fuel mapping. But
he's also got a throttle tamer, which they say takes some of the twitchiness out of the throttle, which is caused by the fact it cuts fuel and spark when you chop off the throttle. Sake of EPA emissions and all that. Mark had discussed buying a complete ECU. I think he got it the other day, so that'll completely transform that bike.
right.
It is genuinely a shame that it seems that it's $800 ECU and then a FMF slip-on to get it to a usable extent where it doesn't want to flame out every time you try to lug it.
Yeah.
Talked to Billy Teo regarding his. I briefly considered buying one like spring of last year and ultimately decided against it because it was, $11,000 new or whatever, plus an extra 1,200 or more in mods just to get it to a point where it would run the way it should. Plus the weight. I think the 450Ls came in at like 280 something pounds.
Yeah. They actually have like plastic filled swing arms and lots of other stuff to try to cut down on the vibrations, and that definitely added a lot of weight on those. Good first attempt by Honda, I think, to try to update their Dualsport line in the bigger market, because the next one after that is the venerable XR650L, which I don't think has been changed since 1987.
There's only
2 years before I was born.
two things in life for sure: death, taxes, and bold new graphics.
I know that's our favorite term all the time.
Absolutely. The DRZ 400 falls in the same category, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
I haven't been on an XR650L. I've been around them. I mean, they're about as simple as you can get. It's just an air-cooled oil boiler, carbureted.
Yep.
It's a lot easier with a carburetor. Get on, JD jet kits or whatever, and get your main jet and all that stuff sized right, versus purchasing the fuel tuner and then hoping whoever you're trying to go off of on the forum has the correct fuel tuner settings. Because regardless of what the directions say, nobody's putting that thing on a dyno with an O2 sensor, and it's supposed to be done, unfortunately.
Yeah. A lot of the guys that are in the club know that my old man Bill Wright has an XR650L that he's done a lot of work to. Just from what I can say from experience being around him, definitely get rid of the smog stuff on the side of it. I think he got a block off plate from XRs only. He's actually rebuilt it. Got enough miles on it where it was burning a little bit too much oil, and it's bumped up compression a little bit on there. A little bit of suspension mods to try to help it out a little bit, but I mean, it's just kind of like all the other Japanese big 650s. I would say if you compare those three, the XR is definitely the most dirt-oriented of the three. The DR, I feel, kind of falls in between an adventure bike and a dual sport, and the KLR is definitely more street-friendly. But I think that's pretty well all the Honda true dual sports. I mean, if you want to get in the adventure bikes, talking about the new Transalp and stuff, but as far as dual sports, that's all for Honda.
Talk about stuff that exists currently.
So let's see. I'd say we'll
end up making something that looks pretty good for the new XR650L. Black wheels, white plastics.
I'm a fan of that. It actually looks pretty sweet, I think. So let's jump to, I guess, Kawasaki kind of be the next. So kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, the new KLX 300, which you still have your 250, right?
Yep, I do. It's hard to get rid of a bike that's that loyal.
Yeah.
But I'd kicked around they make like a 300, a 331, and 351 kit. But again, it's a fuel injected bike, and you're looking at having to figure out fuel tuning. So it's kind of an undertaking. And I was really excited when Kawasaki put out the 300. It's at a good price point, adjustable suspension. Ergonomically, it feels the most like a dirt bike. I think a 250L and a 300L really just have odd street bike like ergonomics. You only pick up like 2 or 3 horsepower, something like that. That's, don't quote me on that, but it's not a significant gain. You're really limited by the aftermarket support on the Kawasaki. Better now. First started trying to buy parts for mine, but the Hondas lead the way in terms of aftermarket support.
Right.
If I had to pick one of the more budget oriented dual sports, it would probably be a Kawasaki 300, just because right out of it you get the adjustable suspension, better ergonomics.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. If I had to pick a little 300, it would definitely be the Kawasaki. I've also heard that they seem like the brakes are a little bit better on the Kawasaki, and that it seemed like it wanted to lug down a little bit lower than the Hondas. I know one knock on the new 300s, they say, or the foot pegs are very, very tiny. So if you got tiny feet, that's a good thing.
Yeah, the stock foot peg on the 250 it was like just 2 fingers width. It was like they belonged on a PW50 or something like that. It was
right.
Like body positioning and all that.
Yes, Nick, we're going to get to that. The greatest dual sport company ever invented.
2023.
So
we'll say, still on the topic of the 250 or the 300L versus the KLX 300. KLX got 2 radiators. It makes a big difference in the wood. And I took our 250s all over the place. Once we'd hit the woods, 2 radiators, my fan would kick on. Happy trails versus his would tend to run seemingly a little bit hotter because you're trying to cool the same size engine with a radiator that's barely bigger than a smartphone.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of moving on from that, though, Kawasaki really doesn't have a whole lot jumping from the 300 clear up to the KLR 650 as far as right now.
What is it?
I do know.
100.
What's that?
They have the Versus 300, but that's really more road gravel bike.
Yeah, I'd put that more towards a small adventure bike. I know Kawasaki and Suzuki shared a lot of technology back in the kind of mid 2000s, and you had the KLX 400, which is just a DRZ.
Yeah.
And then you got the venerable KLR 650. It's been around since Moby Dick was a minnow, and there's different
sandals.
There's different gens and a few cosmetic changes between everything, but the newest model got 30 pounds heavier with EFI and still has a pretty good cult following. And I mean, you can make that thing pretty beefy off-road if you want to. I know our fearless leader, Nick Hall, has one that's taken it places that I don't think a lot of people would try to take a KLR 650. And that's with his wife D on the back too. So, I mean, any of these bikes can be set up how you want to make them. That's for sure. But, kind of the same problems as they had in 1987 with those KLRs still. They never fixed the doohickey. That's still something that you have to look out for with the balance shaft. And
since the mid 80s when they first started producing them, they've went through different versions of that little tuner. And I know there's a guy named Eagle Mike that has a one and done fix for it that Kawasaki went through the trouble to do a refresh and made no attempt to do either that, or I've heard about them having some thermostat related problems where the thermostat will open all at once and it messes the cooling efficiency. But again, it's engineered to a price point to be affordable. So, and
Yeah,
I mean, definitely affordable bike, and it's a good entry into the hobby. I just wish that when these bikes went away for a while and came back, they always come back heavier.
yeah, yeah. And that's a bike that was already a little bit porky as it was.
I think the new ones, some trim levels weigh in at like 460 pounds, which is,
yeah,
and especially for a beginner. I mean, if you're a beginner rider, you're going to drop that thing sitting still. Dropping
yeah,
a lighter weight, like around 300-pound bikes, a whole different ball game than dropping something that, you know, weighs closer to 500.
yeah. And I mean, that's kind of it for Kawasaki, man. You got the KLX 300 and the KLR 650 as far as strictly dual sports go. So I kind of think,
which is an air cooled.
yeah, the 230s, yeah.
Yeah, I saw one down,
Yeah.
and I mean it'd be a great starter bike, but again, it's, you know, conventional style front forks, non-adjustable everything.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Made in Taiwan, like all the other little 250s are
Yeah,
anymore.
I mean, I'm pretty sure my 250 was made in Taiwan or Thailand, like that, and same place as Honda's.
Yeah.
I can't knock it, but reliable. As long as your quality, it doesn't matter where it's made. But yeah, a lot of consolidated manufacturing going on in that area now.
Yep. Oh yeah, and not to leave that out, our good buddy Mark Niggemeyer
Yes,
has a diesel KLR that he rides with us.
it will roll coal, and you do not want to be behind that thing going up. It the fumes from that thing will choke you out.
I love Mark. He's the only guy that I know that could have the most fuel efficient dual sport ever around for mankind, and he almost ran out of diesel down in Brandywine.
Yep. That was one of the most fun rides I'd ever been on.
Yeah, that was a good time. So kind of moving forward, I guess we'll kind of move to Suzuki, Kawasaki's little brother, I like to call him. And we cannot leave out the single greatest Glen Helen 24-hour weapon ever produced, the DR200.
Yes. What Gabe with Torture Test Magazine did with that bike is nothing short of amazing. He went on to completely embarrass people like that, you know, ride an orange bike to 1/10 the ability that he rides what's essentially a, you know, the beginner's bike. It's a bike that, like, people will buy their wives or girlfriends that are wanting to get into riding or something like that. And I mean, are they still available in 2023? Is that still an option?
I'd have to look and see, but I wouldn't see why they would quit making them. I mean, Suzuki's kind of their motto seems to be, let's make the same stuff we've sold since 2006 because people are still buying it at a price point. So I don't see it discontinuing the 200.
The R&D money was paid off before I was even born.
Yep. I think they have I'm not sure if they still make it or not, but they did have a 250 too for a little while.
I think that was like 1990s era thing. I know my buddy Andy had a DR250 for a short period of time. It was like a purple frame, like yellow plastics, and red that. Bikes will never look that cool again. I mean, I know that, but nobody will ever attempt graphics that crazy ever again.
So that kind of moves us forward a little bit, I think, to the DRZ 400, which, I mean, all things considered, that is a very good dual sport bike.
Classic platform.
One of the channels that I follow a good bit on YouTube, Mad TV, Motorcycle Adventure Dirt Bike out of Australia. They follow around a group. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's a rental company that does kind of guided tour rides all the way up from like like Sydney up towards Perth, which is kind of in the northern
Yeah.
peninsula of
Same terrain.
right. And the one rod that they do, they have probably like 10 or 12 of those DRZ 400s, and they're literally putting logs through the tires and carrying them across crocodile infested waters, dropping these things in the river and getting them fired back up. And I mean, for a quote unquote liquid cooled race motor that's in those things, they seem to hold up just as good as an old air cooled motor. I think the biggest knock on the DRZ 400, if you'd ask a lot of people, is the lack of a sixth gear and the carburetor on
That's
it.
exactly what I wanted to bring was, well, actually, there's another too. Lack of a sixth gear. The problem is that all these bikes are grandfathered in because there's no way they'll meet modern emissions.
Right.
Alteration of the gearbox or something like that. I don't even know that they can change ratios at this point, like final drive ratios. I know that's a big shortcoming on the DRZ 400. I've been, around Sean Yalis and his DRZ 400, and it's like to be geared to be good off-road or be geared so it doesn't sound like it's going to float valves trying to do 55.
Yeah.
And then the carburetor, I mean, it's the only way that bike loses a carburetor is to gain 30 plus pounds of fuel injection related equipment.
Yeah.
Bring it back,
Yeah.
so it can be compliant for European markets too. Speaking of, you mentioned Australia. It's my understanding that all bikes from, I think, maybe this year forward have to have ABS.
Yeah.
Suzuki not wanting to spend the R&D money to retrofit ABS systems onto their bikes are pulling out of the market, which is terrible because from what I understand, the DRZ 400 and DR 650 are like the two, I guess, bush warriors of Australia.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, they're pulling out.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the only Japanese 650 that you can get in Australia right now is the new EFI KLR. I mean, it's either that or some kind of European bike. I mean, that kind of narrows your choices down in Australia. There.
Oh yeah, I did see. I can't remember the name of that company, but I briefly researched them before because I've considered buying about every bike there is out there at one point or another.
Yep. If anybody knows, Rob does. He is the guru for Kawasaki and Suzuki. Him and Lissa.
Absolutely. So we touched on the carburetor, DRZ. The other point is it seems like it carries weight really high in the frame. They just feel like a really top-heavy bike. I know they only weigh, a 300L, which is around like 415 or 420 pounds or something like that. Just kind of ballpark. But just getting on one, it's really top-heavy bike.
Yeah. I think that kind of brings us to Suzuki's biggest offering, which is probably, I would consider one of the top 3 greatest dual sport bikes ever produced, and that's the DR 650. I mean, they can be built into anything you really want it to be. A freaking adventure tourer, moto camper. I'm sure you've seen some of the stuff that the Enduro Cross, or what's that guy's YouTube channel? He's in Australia too. He's got the 650.
Kids and stuff. He's the guy that will jump he'll do 4-foot log hops, 4-foot down trunks on a 360-pound bike. He does stuff that puts me to shame beyond belief. Only weighs pounds or something like that. And there's no way I can whip it to that extent.
Yeah.
But they're just a great platform. They have a pretty sturdy subframe, which is a must if you're going to be packing gear and stuff like that.
Right.
They're good if you rackless setup or hard panniers. You want to kit it out for like what we do, kind of local enduro style. You can set it up for adventure riding. You go cross country with it, adventure riding. You do the Transamerica Trail. Pretty much the sky's the limit.
Right.
Well, it's like any other. You're going to have to do some suspension work to it and stuff like that to get it dialed in. And they're not quite easy to dial in as some other bikes, but it's just a really good platform.
Yeah, super robust. I know when they first came out around, I believe it was 96, 97, they had some head gasket issues. But after that, like 98, 99, pretty much bulletproof. Our good buddy Tom King has
Yep.
one that probably has the most miles that I have ever seen on any type of dual sport motorcycle. Tom's got to have 65, 70,000 miles on that DR. I mean, he rides it every weekend.
On the current rebuild, maybe.
Yeah.
The serial frame might as well be, 001 at this point.
Yeah. I think he did have, was it one of the bearings for second gear or third gear, I think, come apart in the case?
And it launched one of the bearings for the transmission, one of the shafts, and sucked it through the teeth of like 4 out of the 6 gears or whatever, and no other harm other than that. It was just this was during COVID, so it was really difficult to try to source at that point in time. But I mean, other than that, like we got it back to his house, and we had the cases and stuff split in the span of like 20 minutes, and they're just simple.
Yeah. Yeah. Good bikes. My sister has one. She got off of our good buddy Fred's dad, Bud. He had one that he didn't ride a whole lot, and Taylor bought it. And I've rode her bike a few times, and it's just a little tractor, man. It's kind of like a diesel KLR power-wise.
Yep. So what's on from the DR650?
I think there's anything else in the Suzuki lineup as far as dual sports are considered. So I think that kind of moves you over to Yamaha now if we're going to keep on going through the Japanese. And you actually own probably the first bike we're going to talk about. And speaking of wild colors, you have one that's probably one of the rarest colors there is.
Yes. So it's a blue frame, blue plastics, an orange seat, orange like solo cup graphics. It was my Yamaha TW200 was the bike that got me back into riding. I rode a little bit as a kid, got out of it, and of course once I was, on my own health insurance, one of the first things I did was go out and bought a bike, and I was just really, I couldn't pass up a bike that was in a colorway like that, because all we get shades of gray, really. TW200 is a great bike. They're fantastic if you're not interested in, going. If you're just interested in going, they're about as simple as you can get. Just an air-cooled, low compression, 200 cc. I don't know if the modern ones still have a backup kickstart. I'm keeping mine around personally. If things pan with property at some point, I'll have something to just kind of run around and check fence line and stuff like that. And it's just a low seat height. It's really friendly for beginners, shorter riders.
Yep. I know growing up, I'd kind of see them always on the back of motorhomes. It seemed like that was the bike to have on the back of your Winnebago to kind of cruise around the campgrounds and stuff. And like you said, yeah,
that's my back
computer. Awesome. I know one of my buddies at work that's actually in the group now with us there, John Latosha, he kind of asked me about buying one there whenever he found it. And I know he's really happy that with his purchase, and he came down to Road Brandywine with us, was kind of worried that he wasn't going to be able to keep up with everybody. And John did great, man. I mean, he kept up right with us, no issue. And
I mean, I got a soft spot for him.
Yeah.
So somebody out there riding one. I took mine through 13 Creeks and stuff like way before I ever met you guys, which in hindsight was, both, it was a terrible idea because I had little to no experience and I was just out touring. But I mean, the bike's geared so low that first gear you can just run along at a walking pace, and it's
Yeah, and kind of same engine for 99% of the different hard parts on it. You obviously have the XT 225 and 250, which has been around for a long time. Kind of in the same market as the DR 200 in some aspects. I know our other buddy John Latosha has an XT 250 that he rides a good bit, and
they still made the XT 225s because, from what I understand, it's closer to full size bike ergonomics, but it's almost pit bike weight.
Yeah.
I got the 21-inch front wheel and either an 18 or 17 rear. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on it, but I know a lot of guys on the forums are big fans of them. They have a lower seat height, but you're not sacrificing, smaller tires. I'd interested in one, just for something to throw in the back of my truck if I was going camping or something like that. If it's lightweight and relatively small and compact.
Yeah, I think they're a good low maintenance, beginner friendly bike. That, I mean, it's kind of a good all around bike. I don't think it's going to do one thing great, but it's probably going to do a lot of things well. Great on gas mileage, like I said, low maintenance intervals, light, easy to throw around, and that's all good things.
Absolutely.
And then, we could talk about the WR250R, but I mean, they don't make it anymore.
I don't want to talk about the WR250R. I want to talk about the WR300R that I've got my fingers crossed that they're finally going to unveil at some point this year.
Let's see why they wouldn't, man. They took the
there's just a huge hole in the market. You've got the higher end performance like KTM and Euro style bikes, and kind of lower performance but more budget oriented Japanese bikes from Honda and Kawasaki. Really, the WR250R was a happy medium. There's a guy in Australia, I think his name's Riding with Tom or something like that, that's got some huge number of miles racked up on his, and it's not a fluke either. There's guys that have, 40+ thousand miles on the original engines of these WR250Rs, and they just absolutely flog them.
Yeah.
But they just hold together great. I really tried to find one, but there was no way that I was paying the prices that people were wanting for them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Really like to see them come back.
Yeah, I think Yamaha could definitely do a lot like what they did with the Tenere 700 using the MT-07 street bike motor. They have an MT-03 that's a parallel twin 300cc engine that I think would be great in a little dual sport adventure bike for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, they're only going to release one because the R&D costs would be pretty significant, but either having like a more adventure oriented twin cylinder 300, kind of like a Versus, but more dirt oriented.
Right.
Inverted forks, adjustable suspension, stuff like that, kind of like a little KTM 390 type rig, or just bring it back as a single cylinder thumper. That's all they would have to do. I know for a fact that they make 100cc kits to retrofit to 250Rs as is. Questioning, is it an emissions issue? Did they determine that's just not a market segment that they want to pursue anymore? Or, well, we all know is the R&D and everything that went to the Tenere 700.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Yamaha's been kind of weird, especially in the United States when it comes to their dual sport bikes. I mean, you've had the XT250, the T-Dub, the kind of on the smaller end, but there's never really been a kind of middle ground below 600cc bike other than the old XT350s, which, I mean, still old Japanese air-cooled technology, not very good forks, drum brakes on the back. Not something that sold very well, I don't think, in the United States. But yeah, you're right. I think every bit of their R&D went into the T7, which is just a fantastic bike.
Yeah,
and
paid off. That's a really solid.
I mean, and it doesn't hurt when you have Paul Terrace kind of doing your marketing for you, doing absolutely incredible things on one of those bikes.
Absolutely whipping around like a trials bike.
Yeah. Well, as far as Japanese brands are considered, I think that's kind of all their dual sport segments. So I think it's time to turn our attention a little bit to the West, into Austria and the Europeans.
Talk about the orange KTMs, the blue and white KTMs, or the red and white KTMs?
I think all the KTMs. So I think a lot of people will kind of agree that if you want the do-all, be-all, pure-bred, dual-sport performance machine, you can't really beat the ones from Austria. I wasn't a guy that drank the orange Kool-Aid. As a matter of fact, I was raised to hate them just because they really were kind of back in the day not the greatest. Had a lot of brake issues, and it seemed like they were blowing up all the time, and parts were super expensive for them. But coming from a 650R Honda that I kind of wish they still made and just put electric start on that, that would have been a great dual sport bike. That 500 EXC that I have is leaps and bounds better. It does everything that I want it to do, and I'm glad I made the switch.
So I rode my Kawasaki 250 for several years. Came from a fellow rider on a KTM 350 EXC. I think it's a 21 model. Had low hours on it. I was skeptical too because that's all you'd ever heard was, you know, reliability concerns. Everyone wants to boo-hoo about the maintenance intervals and things like that. But to me, for the sake of having a plated dirt bike that I do local enduro, like, you know, hit some hills, tight woods, single track, to me it's perfect. Having to change your oil more often is not terrible. It's not ideal by any means. If I could change it, I would. But there's pros and cons you're going to have to take with any machine. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. But if I can save 80 pounds over my 250 and gain, you know, twice the horsepower, having to spend a little bit more garage time every couple of weeks changing the oil if I've been running often is more than worth it to me.
Yeah. Just make sure that you invest stock in Motorex and plenty of oil filters. But I mean, just like for a new guy starting out, I mean, that initial price point is a lot to swallow.
Terrible. You know, one of our own, AJ, recently paid a pretty handsome sum of money for, especially a young man his age. It's a very high cost to entry, which kind of highlights there's not really much between the, you know, $6,000 price bracket somewhere in there, and then next thing you know, you're in the 12,000 plus price bracket.
Right.
Had I cross, you know, a reasonable deal on one, I highly doubt that I paid full price.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to do.
I will say that there are a few bikes that fit in that little category between the KTMs, the yellow, the Huskies, and the Gassins, so to speak. But reliability is a very big concern with those. And to your point, too, I mean, the Honda, by the time you get done buying the programmer, the exhaust, a seat concept seat, your KTM money. And
absolutely.
I'm kind of the mindset that if you're dead set on buying a KTM, you should probably look and try to find a used one with low hours and take away some of that initial sticker shock price.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing about your comment on the Hondas is, you know, just like there's orange Kool-Aid, there's red Kool-Aid. A lot of guys bought into this whole thing without really doing their own research, thinking that it was going to have the same maintenance intervals as like the 250L. And you crack a manual on your brand new 450, and you're pretty much looking at the same maintenance schedules as, you know, KTM. The thing that you said, well, I'll never buy one of those. They're a maintenance queen. Well, unfortunately, you bought a high compression, you know, most racing that they stuck in, and you're going to have to deal with the maintenance intervals that come along with that. It's just going to take more DLC.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, as far as like the KTM line, so obviously you have, which I think they do still make the 250 EXCs, which is kind of,
that's what Jim has, right?
Yeah, our buddy Jim Falk has, which, you know, it's good for throwing around awesome and super tight single track stuff. Kind of rev out on the highway a little bit. There he is. I see him right there. The hill. I watched that man absolutely flip the hell out of that 250 going up this one insanely impossible hill climb that we have here up on a place we call Hell's Hollow. And he gathered up everything, put it in his backpack, his license plate, everything, made it back to camp. So
handlebars back up, and then he tried it again.
Yep, like a boss.
Yeah.
And then obviously,
because I And
Obviously, moving on to what you and AJ have with the 350.
That to me is a very happy medium. I've only got 5 years experience, well, 4 years experience riding. For me, a 500 is more than I care to try to wrangle, especially in tight woods. The 350s are they're more forgiving, especially if you're, whiskey throttle occasionally, which I'm not better at, but it's a lot more forgiving for stuff like that. You still get the low end grunt. They're a lot more flickable, in my opinion. They don't rev out quite as bad on the highway as 250 would. They definitely don't have the long legs that a 500 does.
Right.
But I think it's a happy medium. I think once you put a flywheel weight and do some other basic stuff to it, that it's a really good bike for tight woods, especially the stuff that we have around here.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I gotta say, I'm very happy with my 500. Mine is a 2015 model, which I know a lot of people say is kind of the glory age and brand of the 500. A little easier to tune, and man, the aftermarket is absolutely incredible. Anything you can possibly think of, you can find for that 500 EXC.
If it's aluminum and it's anodized, they make it to bolt onto one of those bikes. I can't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
KTM's the amount of aftermarket support.
Yeah, it's insane. I bought mine pretty well set up from the guy that I got it off of, and didn't really want to go with the size tank that I found, but it was too good of a deal to pass up. So I've got the ginormous 4.1 gallon of Sturbus that takes up the trails and everything.
I'd like to get a bigger tank. I've never really come close to running out of fuel, even over towards like Davis Thomas area and Monongahela National Forest.
Right.
But $400 price point's difficult to swallow for a tank.
Kind of getting off topic here, just very briefly. I don't know if did you see that Elkins Suzuki has a little kind of satellite place there in Thomas now?
I didn't know that. That's going to be really, well, I hope we never have to use it. I don't want to. It'd be convenient if we ever ended up in that position.
Right. I think it's nice to just know that, if we need a tube or something real quick or a chain, we can be able to get it there. That's awesome. 500 EXC, 350 EXC, kind of the bread and butter as far as dual sports go, I think.
Onto the blue and white KTM. Ron Holmes has that Husqvarna 701. I mean, that's a pretty mean bike.
Yeah. Yeah, the 701, I think, it's in a weird spot. It's not, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, really. It's trying to be a hybrid, pure horsepower dual sport bike, but it's a little too radical to be an adventure bike. It's kind of stuck weird in this no man's land, I feel.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's well, again, it's compromise. It's almost too big and too rowdy to be like a woods weapon.
Right.
At the same time, it's probably a little bit. I haven't been on one, but just speculating that it is a single cylinder, right? Or is it a twin?
It's a thumper with the a kind of street oriented trellis frame, fuel tanks in the back, so it's got a low center of gravity with the tank being low. It's kind of hard to put oversized tank on that thing, but they've been out for a million years, and same thing with the 500 EXC. Any kind of issues that are with them, there's something out there to fix it for sure.
Definitely an interesting position, but that's nothing new. I mean, years ago you had the KTM 950 Super Enduro R, which was, I don't even think that thing had any form of traction aid whatsoever. It was just a twin cylinder 950cc. There's a guy following an 80 that has one. He rides out in Utah, and that thing is just an animal.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's about it for our Austrian friends there. So I think you could probably move on to another bike brand company that you owned at one time, and it's also an Axis Power to the south of Austria, and that's down in Italy with Beta. And Beta's kind of come onto the scene I think it was around 2006, 2007, and it was kind of a red KTM. I know the engines were all KTMs, a lot of the hard parts were, and once they kind of found their footing, they decided to kind of go their own way, and they're tough to beat as far as a purebred dirt bike with a license plate on.
Their two-stroke presence too is getting to be pretty significant.
Right.
I'd love to throw a leg over a Beta 200 just to see if it'd make a decent little woods bike.
I'm sure it
Because
would.
it's difficult to find like a KDX or something like that in usable shape that doesn't cost an arm at this point. I had a Beta 500. I didn't own it for long because, like I said, a 500 just ended up being too much for where I was at with my experience level. And as far as fit, finish, function, etc. goes, it was a fantastic bike, but it was a true blue dirt bike with a license plate.
Right.
There, zero real effort for any, dual sport friendly anything on it. I don't even know. I think there was one company that made a rear rack for it, and it was some ungodly price. And it wasn't even like a KTM where you cut the airbox plastic and bolt up to the. It was a little bit more complicated than that. It wasn't.
I think kind of struggles with their. Kev?
What'd you say?
I was gonna say Beta. It's always weird to me when you look at their bikes. Like they have the weirdest engine sizes, like a 390, a 430, like.
But they offer like a huge range of engine sizes through a range where a lot of manufacturers just completely ignore.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same bottom end and all that stuff from one to the other. They probably share similar architecture to save on costs, but yeah, they like I said, when I started researching, it was like, man, I wish I had come across somewhere in the 300 range. That would have been a lot more suitable bike for what I wanted to do.
I picture some marketing guy down in the Sardinia region just smoking a cigarette going, you can have the 390 or you can have the 500. It is the same price.
That's the point that I wanted to make about the KTMs is I think a 350 and a 500 is almost the same price.
Yeah.
Or in a range. I mean, once you're spending over 10 grand, what's another couple $100? I mean, I hate to say it, but at that point, you're really,
yeah,
in too deep.
So I know our French comrades, sometimes waving the white flag. Sherco's come a long way. I'm not sure if any of the Shercos are actually considered street legal.
I remember seeing an article, I think it was a 4-stroke Sherco that they were intending to release as a street legal model. I don't remember if it was only in Europe or if it was in the US too.
Yeah.
I welcome any level of competition. That's what breeds innovation.
Right.
And
absolutely
having more options is just all the better. I used to work with a Sherco 2-stroke that he was very pleased with. He said that there's a lot of stuff that when they went through and designed that bike, they designed it in such a way that it was intended to be a rider's bike.
I know I've seen a couple of the Sherco Trials bikes back in the day and knew about them, and they came out with a 450 like around 2007 that had a lot of issues. And then after like a 10-year lapse, you start seeing them at all the Mountain State Hare Scramble races around here, and you're like, man, there's kind of catching on. A lot of the 2-strokes and the 304-stroke and 454-stroke, and now we have a dealership down in Bridgeport, Enduro 31, that carries them. So kind of nice to see that around
there. I know this is a Dualsport podcast, what have you, but I'd love to try out a trials bike at some point. I mean, as far as really interested in trying one, but again, it's one of those things it's a relatively high cost of entry if you want to buy new, range for a bike that has a really limited range of use.
Yeah. I got to spend a Saturday on a 2011 OSA trials bike, and that thing was a blast.
Have what they call the Explorer. I think it was like a 200cc. It was like a trials bike, but it
Yeah.
a little bit more padded seat and a larger fuel tank, and it was kind of just intended as like a local woods bike type thing. I similar to Beta Cross Trainer.
Same kind of market there. Yep.
From Australia, cross training enduro. Pretty much every videos at some point or another speaks really highly of a cross trainer. That's a class of bike I'd be interested in trying out.
So I think that kind of covers the basis of all the major manufacturers, and of course you have some satellite kind of fringe companies out there that there's not a whole lot known about them. I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of them. Probably first on the list there was SWM.
Yeah.
Which, if a lot of our viewers don't know what SWM is, SWM is the Italian Huskies from like 2013, 2012 up until I believe when KTM bought them out was like 2013 or 14. So a investment company, and I'm pretty sure they're out of China, acquired the factory and all the rights to produce those old Huskies, and they updated them with actually KYB suspension and McCuney fuel injection, and they're selling them at a pretty good price point. I think a new 500 RS is around $7,500. And I mean, quality components, and those were good bikes back in the day. You're sacrificing a little bit of weight, and I think a lot of parts availability is going to be an issue with those as they go forward. But as far as all the Chinese manufacturers to come about, I think SWM definitely has the best shot of surviving.
Did you say that? I can't remember if we touched on it or not. I don't know if they're around anymore, but I think KTM owns the intellectual property for Husaberg now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll ever do anything with it or not. I don't even know when the last Husaberg line.
Yeah, Husaberg, I think the four strokes quit around like 2016, and the two strokes lived on for like another year, 2017. I know one of the GNCC trail bosses, Jared Bolton, who's actually a member of our group, he has a Husaberg. I think his is the 570 with the 70-degree motor. And that thing, I mean, it's cool. It's basically just a big bore KTM four-stroke motor that's on a 70-degree axis.
I miss when bike manufacturers did weird stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I send you articles every now and then from Motocross Action. Weird leading link forks, or like when they were trying to figure out, better forms of suspension and stuff like that. It was just an interesting period of time.
I don't know why I keep going back to this, but I just imagine a bunch of engineers at the warehouse smoking cigarettes like, what if we tried this?
Some of the stuff, I'm pretty convinced they were smoking something a little bit stronger than cigarettes. Speaking of like satellite manufacturing and stuff like that, I don't know if is it pronounced Rayhu or Rayju.
Yeah.
Over the Spain-based remnants of Gas after KTM bought them out and moved production to Austria.
Yep.
I understand they're supposed to be pretty solid bikes.
Yep.
They're definitely not a victim of value engineering. The price point is still, up there.
Yeah.
You do get a lot of premium components. As far as I know, it's mostly a two-stroke line. They don't offer, Dualsport.
Yeah, I don't think they have anything out yet. Actually, Leeson's in Bridgeport is a Raju dealer now, and one of the local factory, or I say factory, he actually is a factory Raju rider now, Brennan Poling. He's been the Mountain State New East Coast champion here the last couple of years. He's actually a factory rider for them, so got a local guy kind of running those now.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, I know you're to bring it up.
I got one more. Right. I got one more company to talk about before we absolutely drag the last one through the mud. And that's a little not really that well known company from Portugal, AJP. And AJP offers their PR4, which is kind of an air-cooled 250, their PR5, which is a liquid-cooled fuel-injected 250, and their PR7, which is something that I would absolutely love to throw a leg over someday. Kind of a Husky 450 slash Yamaha WR 450 crossbred together, but that thing is absolutely bonkers. It kind of speaks to the car rally style bikes with the big fairings and everything. The thing has a huge GPS tablet standard on the rail. It's a sweet looking bike, and everybody that owns one says they absolutely love them and will never get rid of it. But the problem is they only make like 30 a year, and we may be lucky to get one or two in the United States. So good luck ever getting one of those.
Good luck getting parts.
That's true too. That's true too. So I think that's definitely going to bring us to our last manufacturer. It was supposed to be the saving grace for the dual sport community, and that's GPX.
Bike. It was supposed to be the working man's dirt bike when you found about it.
Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with GPX, GPX is a Chinese copy. And when they first came out, they were copies of like 2018, 2019 Huskies. So they had a composite subframe, Husky style tank and graphics. They've since switched over to like 2020 and up KTM style copies with aluminum subframes. I was one of the first guys to buy their FSE 450. I was able to get it street legal in West Virginia. It's 49 state street legal. You can't get them legal in California. But the chassis is a Husqvarna, but the motor is a Zongshin NC 450, which is used in a lot of different Chinese bikes overseas, and it's also used in the CSC RX4 adventure bike from California Scooter Company. And lots of issues with that bike.
Well, you said it just didn't feel like 450 power. I know that in that same for a little while, and I remember you saying that it just did not feel like it was a 450.
No, it's a claimed horsepower of 42. I'd say it's probably closer to 28, 29. It feels like a corked up DRZ 400 more than anything.
I remember you had some pretty significant fueling issues, fouling issues, sensor issues.
Yeah. The Delphi fuel injection that's on that thing is horrible, and that goes for every one of their 4-stroke models that they have.
They say that they've improved. I'm personally not going to pony up the $9,000 to by any means, but
that's my main issue with them. Their whole price point was their saving grace. I only paid $4,200 for that thing shipped brand new in the crate, and for that price, I was willing to put up with a little bit of shenanigans, knowing going in that it was a new bike, a new company, and was going to have some issues. But that same bike, they haven't fixed anything, and now it's $7,400.
So I mean, it's like you said previously about trying to find a lower hour KTM 500. I think those people would be a lot better served with something like that.
Yep.
Or guys on the bike forums and stuff all the time saying, well, I can get this Tal something or other 250 shipped to my door for $1,500. I was like, even though the prices of bikes have gone through the roof post COVID,
yep,
you still, in my opinion, be better served finding a Japanese bike in reasonable condition for a similar price point.
Yep, absolutely. I was able to find my KTM 500 from a buddy of mine that was completely set up other than an oversized tank for $5,800, and it had 1,234 miles on it. So the deals are out there, and for that price, I'm going to jump on that.
Yeah, the whole like you touched on for a bike at that price point, you expect some level of finicky. I mean, it's going to have some quirks and some issues and things like that, and well, especially for you at the time, you were kind of a brand ambassador, or like I don't want to say big necessarily, but that's kind of how it panned out. But they tout these things as a race ready you know, KTM killer almost. And I remember you running one hair scramble with it and didn't even make it many laps in. You had a coolant outlet, you know,
Yeah.
connect plastic or composite, had split open.
Yeah.
That started the cascade that ended up being the final nail in the coffin for your GPX.
Yep. And to go along with that, I mean, it was a horrible design. The CSC 450 adventure bike has a giant steel gas tank that kind of goes over the frame a good bit, and the tanks are different between the GPX and the CSE, obviously. So on the CSE, it has a inlet hose or inlet neck for the coolant head that sticks straight up and down, and there's plenty of room behind the gas tank. Well, they use the same neck on the GPX, and it was straight into the gas tank. So the hose came off and had to make a 90-degree bend to go to the radiator, and it was sitting there rubbing on the gas tank constantly. And to go along with that, it had a plastic Y underneath of the frame horn in the front, and it was completely exposed. And that thing, it got so hot, it split. I lost all the coolant. I mean, it's on me. I should have stopped. I seen the thing starting to overheat really bad.
You're racing.
Yeah. All things considered, though, that motor would have been completely fine with a new piston and ring set. But with parts availability being an issue for a Chinese motor in the United States, there was no piston and ring top end kits to have. GPX had a quote unquote crate engine that was ready to go. They sold it to me as a complete crate engine. They said since I was a brand ambassador and promoting their stuff on YouTube and Facebook and everything else, that they would knock about $500 off the price. So I paid $1,200 shipped for a brand new complete engine. And when the engine came, it was missing every single piece of the clutch assembly. It was missing everything for the oil pump gears and idler gears. It was missing the stator. It was missing. I mean, it was a parts motor. There was nothing else to say about it. And I ended up having to take every bit of that stuff off of my old engine and build two to be able to race that weekend. And GPX told me, they said, well, send us a list of everything that was missing. Obviously, we want to make this right. Okay, good on you guys. I sent them the list, and they send me an invoice back for, I think it was $943 worth of parts. And I said, well, wait a minute. You guys owe me that stuff. You sold me a complete engine that wasn't complete. And the owner's words were, and I quote, "That's not how this transaction is going to go." And their customer service sucks.
Save face ever since.
Yeah.
That's another thing. If you are going to be a U.S. based distributor for a bike that's manufactured overseas and, you know, otherwise has no support over here, customer service is the name of the game. Even if it's, you know, eating crow every now and then, it's kind of a make or break for establishing a brand. And for me, at least, not a brand of bike that I'm interested in any capacity. I'd dust my 250 Kawasaki off before I'd entertain the idea of something like that. Get around
The funny
sport.
The funny thing is, when GPX came out on the scene, they kind of wanted you to think that they were the only game in town, so to speak, as far as those chassis and those engines. And come to find out that there's at least 8 different companies that buy that same bike from one plant in China. And once you order enough of those bikes, they give you any kind of color plastic and graphics you want, so you can make up whatever bike brand company you want to make. Thumpstar, one of the big pit bike companies out of Australia, they sell all the exact same GPX bikes just with Thumpstar graphics on them.
I really don't know why I expect any different for being a you know, China offshore-based manufacturer. That's kind of the name of the game. Is, you know, you order from us. Here's our cookie cutter model. We'll slap your logo on it, and you can claim it's yours. Kind of in that same, I know that they entered some Kove, Kove bikes in the Dakar Rally, which props to that in itself is a huge undertaking. But Kove is kind of a subsidiary or a rebrand of GPX. They're featuring the 450 motor and a rally-oriented bike chassis. So you get kind of the lower slung exhaust, the rally tower, the fairings, all that stuff. I haven't really kept up on how they're doing. I know they completed at least one stage based on a video that I watched.
So, typical Chinese fashion, they made it to stage 3, and 2 of the bikes were out of order. One of them had spoke failure on both wheels at stage 3,
Yeah.
and the other one had fuel injection issues. So they took a bunch of the parts off the 2 that didn't work to put on the third one to try to keep it going, and I believe that they never finished the race. And I think the funniest thing I saw, and it was a lot of stuff on Instagram, promoting that thing, was you had the Cove bike, which is a KTM clone of the Dakar KTM bikes, and they were sitting there in the pits, and directly across from them was KTM. It looked exactly the same.
It's
Like
like
one had red Chinese communist graphics on it.
it's like you versus the guy she's not to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say this to everybody, anybody listening out there, and I know we've only got 8, but appreciate everybody tuning in. If you are dead set, and I mean absolutely dead set, on getting a weird Chinese full-size bike, go buy an SSR 450. At least you can go to any dealership you want and buy CRF 450X parts, and they bolt right on.
I did see you can buy one of the KTM rally bikes for I think $35,000.
The Cove Rally you can buy for $14,500,
Yep.
and it's not street legal.
It is not street legal, which being a rally bike, I guess, isn't, that's kind of par for the course. But I'd be really curious to see what amount of justification they've got for the price difference between their regular 450 and the 450 rally, because the suspension and everything I don't think is that much different. And I know that fairings can amount to $8,000.
No.
So, but I mean, if they can, I don't have high hopes, but if they can get it together to the point where they can start developing their own designs and creating their own intellectual property in terms of, engine management systems, etc. Another competitor for the Dakar Rally of all things would be fantastic.
Yep.
But no way that I would trust my life in wide open desert, nothing as far as the eye can see to an unproven platform like that.
Rob makes a good point here too about Christini, which I'm so happy that both of you are watching. I got to ask, are you both sitting on the couch like right beside each other with both your phones watching this, or how's that work? But yeah, Christini, 2-wheel drive bikes. So I know that the 300 2-stroke is a gas / Raju motor. One of my buddies up here, what is his name? Drawing a blank. Anyway, ex-racer, pretty fast guy. He has the 300 2-wheel drive. And the 450 is a SSR 450 that they've modified into a 2-wheel drive bike, kind of modified the frame with a different planetary gear set with a chain that goes up and the telescoping rods that drive the front hub. And, a lot of people give SSR a lot of flack for that, but the U.S. Special Forces actually use the Christini 450 2-wheel drives in their operations overseas. And to me, if the United States military thinks that a Chinese 450 is good enough for them, then it's probably good enough for 99% of everybody else that's out there as well.
I've always just been interested in just trying one, even kind of like a sandbox, like trials day scenario. Mm-hmm. Just what having a driven front wheel would be like. I know on the old Rokon Trail Breakers, they had some kind of mechanism that once you turn the wheel so far, it would disconnect the front wheel because otherwise it would make it track really strangely going through the turn. The Christini is kind of intended to be like, real rough terrain, but kind of mostly straight, like get yourself out of a nasty, section or something like that.
I got to ride my buddy's 300, and it definitely takes some getting used to, especially like powering out of a corner. It's a lot of times a bike wants to lean with the corner, as soon as you hit the throttle on one of those Christini two-wheel drive bikes, it wants to stand up. And it's a weird feeling. And it's adjustable. You can control the bias ratio between the front and rear.
Okay.
But yeah, it takes some getting used to. I found that if you carried your speed faster into the corner and just kind of rolled through the corner, and once you got through the end to get back on the throttle, it wasn't as weird. But that first time, I was like, "Oh, what is this?"
I can imagine. Well, maybe down the road with, you know, the electric bikes and stuff getting to be viable. I don't know if you follow the Stark Varg, but I swear that thing has been, you know, 2 weeks from release for years at this point. A bike driven front hub.
Yeah. That was going to be my last point, I think, was definitely the future. And e-bikes, they're going to be around for a while. I actually got the chance to ride a Alta Redshift up at High Point Raceway a few years ago. And when I got over there, you know, it's typical, you know, 450 motocross styling and ergos. I get on the thing, and it has like 5 power modes, and it's on 2. And I asked the guys, like, you know, well, what's 2 like? He's like, it's like a 300 2-stroke. So they had a little kind of fast grass track section set up, and I got to get on the thing and take it through the grass track there, and yeah, it felt like a 300 2-stroke. And it was just weird not having that vibration through the handlebars, or the smoke and the smell and the sound. You know, you just heard the chain slapping, and you heard the wheels gyroing. And I get back towards their finish line there, and the guy's like, "Turn it up," and I was like, "All right." So I turned it up on 3, and that thing was way faster than any 450 I've ever ridden in my life. And it's standing straight up and down out of every corner. It's trying to throw me off of it, and it still has 2 more power modes to go. And I get there, and I ask the guys, like, "Why is there 5?" He said 5's for the 12 o'clock boys in Baltimore.
Oh, that makes sense. Man, it's like a lot of stuff that still has to be figured out. Mostly range related. Unfortunately, we're kind of stuck with the energy density of lithium-based battery technologies until something else comes on the market that, you know, they can, you know, sub 200-pound bike that can be ran for hours and hours on end.
I think
it's kind of,
I think Alta had something there, and it's a shame that they got partnered up with Harley Davidson, who pretty much ran them straight into the ground.
Actually, immediately tanked the brand. It was almost like a corporate hit job.
Yeah, I've seen some stuff about the Stark Varg. I've never really seen one in person. I know, I think it was Waynesburg Yamaha had one in stock there a while back, and I actually saw a bike on Marketplace the other day that looked exactly like an Alta, and it was some Chinese copy of it. And there was a dealer that was selling them up there. I think it was around somewhere a little bit east of Waynesburg, I think it was. And it was like $5,300. So yeah, and then you have the Surons, which are more of a mountain bike, dirt bike hybrid.
Point is that there's plenty of, they're not quite an e-bike, an e-dirt bike, an e-mountain bike type deal, that it's definitely not close to being a full size you know, bike frame by any means. It's a lot more oriented to like people that have experience with mountain bikes. From what I understand, they've gotten to be like a good bit of, I guess, hackability. As with anything else, guys immediately start taking it apart and figuring out what can be improved and everything else. I'm interested in the platform. As far as, you know, electric bike companies go, Suron's probably towards the top of the list in terms of innovation. And if I had to spend my money on one, that probably would be it. But like I said, tech just isn't. It's just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I know. Suron has a new one coming out called the Storm Bee, which is more motorcycle based, and that thing actually looks pretty sweet.
I wouldn't mind trying one at some point, but like, it's got a ways to go.
Yeah, I I consider myself too old school, I think, to fully commit to an electric bike.
I like the feedback. I like knowing that there's, however many thousand explosions in a given time frame to move that bike.
It's it's
Another
it's
thing,
it's internal combustion, mate. It's the essence of everything.
yeah,
It's freedom.
you better hope it stays internal.
Yeah.
Another problem with these electric bike manufacturers is a lot of times that they market to guys that want to ride dirt, but they don't take into account any of the, wants or needs of someone that wants to ride dirt. I know that, they think that a clutch is just some kind of antiquated, useless technology now. I can't imagine riding just completely sans clutch. I understand that it's got, it's not stallable. It's got, 100% torque at 0 RPM for the stall torque condition. But there's still situations where it's a lot more beneficial to slip a clutch than it is to try to modulate power with a throttle.
How many electric bikes do you see competing at the hard enduros?
I mean, at this point, 0 to my knowledge. You give it a couple, maybe. I don't know. Like, it's just there's a lot yet to be figured out, and it's going to take some major manufacturers to embrace the technology. It's going to take KTM, and they have produced an electric bike before. I can't remember what it was called. Maybe an E. That.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just going to take.
I don't know if it's quite around the same type of feeling that, like, when the four strokes first kind of came on, high performance liquid cooled four strokes. It took a while for the industry to kind of shift over to that. But this feels a little slower than that to me.
Yeah, well, of course, I wasn't around at that period of time, but it definitely feels like a slow burn. And it feels like one of those deals where everyone's just going to kind of write them off as a toy or a joke, and then suddenly the technology will get to a point where they're going to become competitive. But like I said, personally, I'll stay with gas-powered bikes until someone from the EPA, pulls the bars from my hands, more or less. I'm just a big fan of it in general.
You come and take my two-stroke.
Yeah, you tell them.
I love two-stroke.
Fortunately, that will end up being the future. It's kind of how it's going to end up going.
Yeah.
Next point, Graham Jarvis will ride one at an event, and everybody's going to want one.
Well, Graham Jarvis also looks like he's 84 years old after riding what he does.
I tell you what, if I could spark a deal, I would look like that in exchange for that riding ability.
I think we're both more on the Van Jarvis riding plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. That was the highlight of the summer.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up all the dual sports out there for the most part. Maybe we'll talk about adventure bikes another day. Anything else you want to go over before we go to bed?
I mean, I'm sure I'll think of something later that I wanted to bring up, but we can just save that for another session. I think we touched on kind of a good range of offerings of the industry right now.
Lots of rambling that 9 people seem to like because they stayed and watched us ramble on forever.
Surprised at so.
Well, appreciate you coming on with me and kicking this thing off. And I know we've talked about doing this for a while, and it's fairly fun.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy just sitting and talking bikes. It's a good break from the weekday monotony.
For sure. I'd like to eventually talk about adventure bikes and a little bit of everything around here. I also want to kind of go over the racing history of our local area because, man, we got some really cool, awesome riders around here. Maybe do some interviews and stuff like that and kind of save that history, so to speak, because it's going to go away. And I'm sure we'll talk about more dual sport stuff for sure.
Sure. Well, like I said, I feel like that about covers it for now. So
Sounds good. Thank you all for tuning in. Keep an eye on the FDSR page. We'll try to do this. I don't know. We'll come up with a schedule. Talk about more stuff.
sounds good to me, man.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Keep your Trackmasters fresh and your beers fresher.
Absolutely.
Later.